The cameras had barely stopped flashing when the gavel came down. "Senator Kennedy," Judge Thomas said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You are hereby fined $500 million for contempt, obstruction, and abuse of public trust." The courtroom gasped. It was the kind of moment that lives in history books and late-night news cycles. But for Senator Jackson Kennedy, it wasn't a headline. It was a reckoning. Just a year ago, Senator Kennedy had been one of the most admired figures in American politics. A war veteran turned progressive firebrand. He was known for his fiery speeches and unwavering defense of the people. Poor kids in Baltimore knew his name. Farmers in Kansas called him one of us. He wasn't perfect, but he was real, and that made him dangerous. What few knew was that Kennedy had been quietly investigating a massive corruption ring inside the federal judicial system. Billions had been funneled into offshore accounts through backdoor legislation and fake infrastructure projects. At the heart of it all was Judge Lawrence Thomas, charismatic, unshakable, and secretly the puppet master of one of the most powerful legal syndicates in the country. Kennedy had gathered the evidence. Documents, testimonies, financial trails, airtight. But when he brought it to light, something happened no one expected. The system turned on him. Indictments were filed overnight. The media spun the story. Kennedy accepts foreign donations. Senator paid off prosecutors. Kennedy lied to Congress. None of it was true. But truth doesn't trend, scandal does. And that brought him here, standing in court, being buried beneath a mountain of lies and a $500 million fine, crafted solely to destroy him. Judge Thomas smirked beneath his robe. "Any final words, Senator?" Kennedy stood slowly, eyes hollow but unafraid. "Yeah," he said. "Just one thing. I forgive you." The courtroom froze. "I forgive you," Kennedy repeated. "Because I know what fear can do to a man. I know what greed can do. I've seen it twist people into shadows of who they once were. You were a great man once, Your Honor. I studied your rulings in law school. You taught me to believe in justice. And now, you're burying it." Thomas's face twitched. "Barely. You've built an empire on silence," Kennedy said, his voice rising. "But I refuse to be quiet. Not now. Not for $1. Not for $500 million. The court was silent. You could hear breaths being held. "You want the public to think I'm a traitor," Kennedy continued, "but I'd rather die honest than live in fear. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But this," he held up a thick folder, now shaking in his hands, "this is the truth. And if I go down, I'm taking the truth with me into every home in America." The judge slammed his gavel. Enough. But it wasn't. Kennedy looked to the gallery. Among the crowd were reporters, aides, even a few fellow senators who hadn't turned their backs on him yet. He stepped down from the stand and handed one of them the folder. "Publish it," he said. Judge Thomas stood up. "Bailiff." But the air had shifted. One by one, people in the courtroom began standing. It started with a junior clerk, then a former prosecutor, then a young woman in the front row whose brother had been imprisoned by a corrupt judge tied to Thomas's circle. The judge's gavel pounded like a heartbeat, but it was too late. The crowd wasn't listening. "I said sit down," Thomas shouted. "No, Your Honor," someone said softly. "You sit down." It was the court stenographer. And just like that, the spell broke. By the next morning, the documents Kennedy had handed over were published on every major platform. Leaked audio files, bank records, whistleblower affidavits. A 20-year empire built on blackmail and bribery fell apart in days. An emergency Senate hearing was called. FBI agents swarmed the district court. Judge Thomas tried to flee but was caught at a private airstrip in Georgia. By week's end, he was the one standing trial. The fine against Kennedy was dropped. Charges dismissed. The judge who had tried to silence him became the most disgraced figure in judicial history. But Kennedy didn't celebrate. He stepped away from politics, at least for a while. "Not because I lost faith," he said in an interview. "Because I wanted to remember who I am without the spotlight." He spent a year teaching civics at a small high school in Ohio. Drove across,